All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, this might be a little bit of a potpourri, but they're all related. One thing we wanted to address was that if you're not watching our Wheel of Time episodes, then you're only getting the us bashing the feminine. But we've been bashing the masculine in our Rand episodes. So those are a good watch, even if you haven't read the books. And it's not really a spoiler even. It's just talking about the way they act.
Yeah.
So check them out. You don't even have to know Wheel of Time to get the concept. So you'll get a lot of that. We're gonna go into that a little bit today too, because we're gonna talk about some of the negatives of masculine, but we're gonna get onto the education system as well, which unfortunately is on the feminine as well. It's been run since 1979 in that way, and we're gonna talk about rigid thinking coming out of that because it's pretty much on par with how we're being developed these days.
Well, it's doubly toxic. You just made me realize this because yes, increasingly, and when I went over that article by Helen Andrews of the Great Feminization Theory, and she gave out numbers of colleges of education and college graduates and lawyers and all of these numbers of are increasingly majority female or close to majority female. But so there's where the toxic femininity comes in.
Well,
But
and just to plug
remember,
it, she's
yeah,
she's doing the rounds in the interview circuit now because
okay.
of the controversy that comes around it. And nice, I think it's like only like 30 or 40-minute interview on Unheard. It's
Mm,
pretty concise, and she fleshes out some of the points she makes in the article. So,
yeah. As we've ranted about before, the toxic masculinity side of the education system comes in from the fact that our modern education system as a system was imported from Prussia.
mhm.
Okay. So not even Germany, but Prussia, which is the most German of Germany. When you think about the stereotypes of Germans and their rigid autistic engineering mind and culture, you're usually thinking of Prussia. It's not quite the same in the southern parts of Germany. The culture, the mentality, it's a little bit different.
It's huge in contrast with each other, but if you just interact with someone from that area without knowing the extreme end of it, you would
Mhm.
still say it's about putting things in boxes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and the point of those boxes was factory workers and soldiers. That is what Prussia wanted to create. And
Mhm.
that is how Prussia, so for a very long time, if you only know modern history, you think of Germany as this great nation. Germany is a very new nation. Germany, as a united Germanic nation, is barely 100 years old. It's just a little over 100 years old. It wasn't united under one nationality until the 1870s and a war with France,
Yeah,
because that's how they do
Heath,
things.
Heath, we're older now. That's 150 years ago.
Shut up. Point being, um, one of the ways it was able to become a great nation is because of this rigidity. They said, we need factory workers and we need soldiers, and then we're going to be a strong nation. And it worked. There were a lot of downsides to it, though.
hmm It
Um,
worked on a timing level as well as just the population demographics because they kind of have that collectivist mentality to begin with, but also we were like peak industrial revolution at
yes.
the time. So it was male and female because you had the factory workers, you had the soldiers, but you also had the textile workers, and women were coming out of the home, and that was where they went. They went into like the textile industry. Yeah.
And it's a great example of how it's people, not race, for all you modern racists out there. And by modern racists, I mean the critical theory people, because at about the same time, on the other side of the world, literally, Japan was doing the same thing.
hmm
Japan forced its way into modernization, industrialization, and grew incredibly rapidly from a literally feudal system in the 1860s when they were forced to open up into, by the end of the 1800s, they wrecked one of the great European powers in the Russian Empire in the in
Which is
the
which is also a
Russo-Japanese
good
War.
testament to one of our recent previous episodes on the pendulum swing. They went from basically constantly warring feudalism to ultra collectivist
Hmm.
almost overnight. The
Yeah,
pendulum swung.
very Germany, Prussia becoming Germany and Meiji Japan becoming Imperial Japan, very similar. And again,
And for
what's
those
the
that are
con
saying, oh, well, that's a good thing. Look how productive Japan is and stuff. That's also how we got the Nazi Party. So,
exactly.
yeah.
It the okay, you were able to achieve this great thing because you lifted all these people out of poverty. You created great industry. I've talked before about how in the early 1900s, the place to be was Berlin. Not just for industry, but for academia, for culture. You know, early film, the music of the time. The cultural hub was Berlin. And then within a generation, that same culture had perpetuated two world wars and some of the worst atrocities known to man. That Stalin said, "Hold my vodka," and proceeded to do more, and Mao said, "Hold my rice wine," and proceeded to do even more. But I digress.
You're
Uh,
so racial.
yeah. Um. Point being,
Well, you know
the
what? Pound for
trade-off.
pound, Pol Pot might have been worse
Oh no, literally by if you go by per capita, he was
per
the worst.
capita. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, as far as how much of his population he killed.
And if you
Um.
don't know who Pol Pot is, that's a testament to our education system. So there you go.
Back to the education system. So let's some more equal time and equal bashing. W, back when he was the governor of our state of
Hmm.
Texas, he instituted education reforms that when he became president, he pushed through on a national level with this No Child Left Behind policy. And the it even further uh, entrenched this rigidity because one of the things that was convincing to me as a youngster that I later grew to realize, no, that's a terrible, don't do that, is this idea that a lot of conservatives have that government should be run like a business. And now, and W started this with public-private partnerships, but the private were charities and NGOs.
Hmm.
And that was their way of, no, no, we can make government more efficient. No, that's a terrible idea because government does not have the same incentive structure and the same restrictive structure that a business has. And so you're actually just making things worse, whether you're on the left or the right. That public private partnership is just making things worse. And so in the good idea of, hey, we need to make teachers in schools, they need to be held to account so that we can increase standards and increase output and make sure that our children are actually learning the things we're supposed to learn. Okay, good idea. Much like Prussia and Japan of, hey, we need to modernize, our people are backward and poor and the world is going to run over us. Okay, good idea. So we're going to institute this incredibly rigid system that we force through and make everybody do. Okay, well now you've got a problem.
Hmm.
And you've got all the ancillary knock-on effects that we talked about. And where you see that in the education system is people started teaching the tests.
Hmm.
And and then the people who made the test said, because they're teaching the test, if we structure the test in a certain way, then we will force them to teach what we want them to teach. And who creates the tests? Colleges of education.
Hmm. Who, as I've mentioned before, have the lowest IQs of all colleges and school. The people teaching your kids have the lowest IQ of anybody that goes to school
Mm-hmm.
collectively. Uh, not on an individual basis. Grady Galke was amazing, but collectively,
But he was the exception that proves the rule because he didn't go through a college of education. So we've talked about
yeah,
our
that's
late
right.
great calculus and physics high school teacher before. He did 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam. He got out of the Air Force as a major. He graduated from the Air Force Academy as an electrical engineer. He worked at Texas Instruments. He ran a business for himself, and teaching was his quasi retirement. He had gotten kind of bored being semi-retired and was like, I'm gonna go teach school. And so he got his certification in physics and math to teach high school physics and math because that was his background. He had the education, he had the experience, and he stepped in and did that. And that is a big reason why he stood out so much from so many other teachers because he didn't go through a college of education.
Yeah, and he would do things with the class, like he would do the standard lecture, we would do the practice problems, but then the second half of class, we would sit around and he would bring a real world problem that involved the math we were learning.
Mm-hmm.
And we as a class would he would be like, okay, so what that you just learned would be useful here. And we sat around and talked about it, which is actually one of the more positive directions that some universities have gone. My program does it a lot. We have the lecture, we have the practice on the lecture, but we also have group discussion time in class about real world application of it. Now, I say real world, it's academic papers, which are kind of disconnected from the real world, but it's at least a positive direction. But
Mm-hmm.
Galki was doing it in 1996, right?
Exactly.
So it's
Yeah, now there's a
and he was
technical
doing
term
it
for it,
he
and
was
I can't
doing it
remember what it was.
instinctually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what is it? Integrated. Gosh, yeah, they've thrown the term out there before too. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's a certain type of education program where you're combining the the lecture with the group discussion. But yeah, it's something he did instinctually, and I'm glad there's a little bit of that now in the at least higher level college education, maybe not in the undergrad, but yeah. Okay, so I just brought out the exception to the rule, and I did not know he had that background on him.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It, a big point, I can't remember if I made this point when I talked about the distinction between rational and logical, how someone can be acting completely rationally
hmm.
from their point of view, but if you have blinders on, then you don't see the flaws in your assumptions, which
Well,
is why what you are doing is illogical. And a
okay,
great
so I'll give
example
you
of
an
that is the math word problem.
yeah. Well, I'll give you a good example just in psychological aspect. If you're angry, it is very rational to punch somebody in the face. But if you did the calculus on, well, then I'll probably go to jail and then da 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 da. So it's rational to punch somebody in the face when you're angry, but it's not logical
Mhm.
because the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we used to do a lot of word problems, and students hated them because it's a lot easier to just look at a formula and say two plus two equals, right? But if you say, Johnny has two apples and very, very basic, but now you're having to engage both hemispheres and you're having to think things through. The point of the word problem is critical thinking. It's not even about what the math formula or principle is that you're trying to do. The point of it is to get you to think critically. And and when you're just teaching to a test, it's what you need to know is this formula.
Hmm.
And then even if you do have word problems on a test, you can game the system if you know these word problems are already structured in this way.
Hmm. Yeah, it's the same complaint I have about medicine now. Standardized test, well, we have another one, standard of care. And if you don't follow the standard of care, you can be sued. Whereas we still celebrate in media the rogue House, right?
Yeah.
Everybody that's seen the show House, what is he fighting every episode? He's not fighting a specific disease or something. Well, he's fighting his own mental health. But other than that, what is he fighting every episode is the standard of care
Mm-hmm.
because he's constantly having people say, oh, no, you can't do it that way. Oh, no, you need to do it this way. And he's like, no, that's not what the patient needs. He's actually being a real doctor and we celebrate it. But you can't do that in real life. That's why it's a TV show and we say, ah, it's fiction. Ha ha. It's you can't do that in real life because if you do that and mess up, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it and get it right, you still might be done. We saw that during COVID,
That's a good point. Yeah, that's dire. Um,
but we celebrated in media.
we celebrated in media.
But in real life,
In the you know what? We do the same thing in the education system. There have been, not lately, but there used to be a number of TV shows, movies, adaptations of real life. I think the most recent one I can think of is Coach Carter, where
that was
somebody
Samuel L.
goes in,
Jackson, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
somebody
That
goes
was a great
into
movie.
a failing school system and says, "We're not going to keep doing the things the way we've used to. I'm going to do things differently." And he bucks the system, and he gets results. And to your point, not only do you not do that, but even if you get the results, you're still probably going to be in trouble
Hmm. I mean,
because you didn't follow the procedure.
one of my favorite actors of all time, Robin Williams. We got Dead Poet Society. We
Mhm.
got Patch Adams. And the theme of those shows was I'm going in and just like you said, doing it differently because what you're doing isn't working.
And it's not like we don't have fairly recent history to show this. So something I teased last time is my great grandma, who lived until she was 96 or 7. And so I remember her very well. And she told stories of one of the things she did as a younger woman was she was a school teacher. She taught in a one-room schoolhouse in rural Oklahoma. Okay, so think of the stereotypes of the old West, and you're there. I mean, it was rural enough that
Little
there were
House on the
kids.
Prairie stuff right there.
Exact. No,
Yeah.
literally. She said she had kids that would double up and ride to school on a horse or a mule together. Okay, because not everyone had cars still, and and so she had students that were that rural and that poor is they would ride a mule to school. Okay, she wasn't some genius. She didn't have, you know, a, she didn't go through a college of education. I don't even know if she went to college, but she knew enough to know what she knew and knew what she didn't know and knew enough to be dedicated to teach these kids. From this one room schoolhouse, you had kids that would then go on to be drafted into World War II and be soldiers and sailors and airmen and mechanics and pilots. Great grandma did not know or teach aerospace engineering, and yet those kids were able to go on and do those things. She did not have an advanced math degree. She had kids that went on to become accountants and bankers. Why? Because she was teaching them how to think, not what to think. Yes, she had, and I was looking for some and I couldn't find, but if you dig around, you will sometimes find like old elementary or middle school primers from back in the 1800s or early 1900s. And it's like, I don't think a high school kid could do this these days. And I couldn't find a good example of that, but if you dig around, you can find some. And that was one of the ways that she was able to teach these kids, is because you had good quality educational products, the purpose of which was to teach you how to think, to make you think, to exercise your brain, not to say, sit down, shut up, and memorize this thing.
Hmm.
And even the memorization, people talk because that was going out of style when I was a kid, and I had a middle school history teacher who still thought, no, this is important, and she still made us memorize things like the Gettysburg Address or the preamble to the Constitution, and because those things are important, not just because it's a good exercise for your brain to commit something to memory, but these things that you need to memorize, you're memorizing them because they're important.
Yeah, and that's a huge distinction there because one of my favorite graduate professors in my first graduate degree, uh, he he was really, really, really big on, okay, so we're in grad school now. It's not just about memorize this and take a multiple choice test, but here are the things you're probably going to use every day, all the time. You need to know this back and forward, up and down. And if someone slaps you in the middle of the night and says, what are Newton's three laws? You should be able to just pop up and throw them out there. Inertia, F equals ma, and opposite equal reaction, right? You should be able to just pop up and say it because you're going to use that every day as a physiologist and a biomechanist. Steps to a muscle contraction starts with a thought, right? All the way down to calcium pump. So those are the things you're going to use all the time as a physiologist and biomechanist. The rest is what books are for. He said,
I
at that point,
yeah.
all you need to know is where to look and how to look.
I had that a
And
couple weeks ago because my son was asking me about target heart rates and things. I was like, I don't know, man. Let me go dig up my textbook. And I went and I dug out the CS textbook and I was like, all right, I know what I'm looking for. Let me back in the index here, table, take a picture, send him the table, explain to him what the table means and how to use it.
yeah.
Here's the table, here's the formula, here's how you use it. Go.
And now that I have a cog psych and a developmental psych background in this, it makes so much sense because we only have so many cognitive resources.
Mm.
And especially as we age, we only have so many resources. And in fact, what I'm getting from this aging class as I read these papers and go through the material and everything is that one of the things about aging is we just start to get more and more and more efficient with how we use our cognitive resources because they're declining.
Mm.
This you're losing cells, you're losing this, you're losing that, you're losing energy, you don't metabolize as well. Your vitamin intake is not relative to what you absorb. All of those things. So we cognitively start actually just becoming very, very efficient, as we'll get to with rigid thinking. But so that was very profound from his point as a professor, because if you focus all of your cognitive resources on memorizing everything, you are going to lose a whole lot on actually doing the job.
So I haven't watched him in a while, and I've mentioned why I stopped watching Steven Crowder. But I did watch a bit of a clip because I was curious. After Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Crowder hadn't done in a couple of years. He's a meme now, and yet it's been 2 or 3 years since he did a Change My Mind.
Mm.
And he in I saw a clip of him talking to someone in this Change My Mind that he did at here nearby. I was contemplating going, but I was busy because I think it was at SMU, um, which is downtown Dallas, basically. Um,
I just had one of my former clients, tight end for SMU, not pass away, graduate.
oh, that's different.
That's a different one. Yeah, he graduated. I
Yeah.
think he just got married too. So
And
congratulations.
Crowder mentioned there were a couple reasons he stopped doing them. Is that well, he said he started doing it again because he felt obligated because of what happened to Charlie Kirk to say, you know what, we're not going to be afraid and we're going to keep doing this. He said the reason he stopped is one, it just became a pain in the butt because of security.
Hmm.
And you see why that was important. He said the other reason is because so many other people started doing it, taking what he did with Change My Mind and taking what Charlie Kirk had been doing with his TPUSA campus stuff. And he said that so on the one hand, he was glad to kind of pass the torch and see other people take up this idea. He said another reason he wanted to get back to doing it is he was disappointed to see that a lot of the people who had started doing this kind of thing were doing it as a gotcha.
Hmm.
And he said, I never wanted to do a gotcha. If you come at me in a hostile manner, okay, I'll push back. But I don't want to do a gotcha to some poor college kid because I know why they think what they think, which is they've never been exposed to anything else. And so many of the times, especially when he would do it on a college campus, the point Crowder was trying to make wasn't I'm right, you're wrong. Very one of the more frequent things he would say is, why do you think you've never heard this? Why do you think you've never been exposed to these facts? Why is this the first time you are hearing someone with this opinion? And more importantly, hearing the reasons they hold this opinion. So, what he was saying, what he was trying to attack without using the words is the rigid mental thinking. because that rigid mental thinking is what gets you to the place where someone can be killed simply for holding a public debate and you celebrate it. Someone can be killed for holding public debate and you say we need more of it. You attack the people who are holding vigils in that person's memory. You tear down their memorials. You shout down and run off speakers who say uncomfortable things. You hold one of them hostage by forcing her to barricade herself in a classroom,
Hmm.
and then nothing happens to you. And that's the other part of the where the rigid mental thinking comes from and how it has gotten worse and worse and worse is no consequences.
Hmm.
Not only
Well,
are you not being exposed to contrary things, when you act out illogically, you do not suffer any consequences.
well, let's look at demographics. Andy knows reported on this with a group called Antifa, right? It's not the people that they say they are uh, advocating for. It is not the poor urban black man that is Antifa. When they actually get exposed on who they are, finally, and again, credit work of Andy No and his colleagues, they're middle class, white, privileged college students that have been indoctrinated without being exposed. And what I mean by being exposed is they don't know what they're advocating for because they haven't been there. They have books on what it's supposed to be. They have read people like Kimberly Crenshaw and Bell Hooks and Angela Davis and all of these intellectuals who have written academic, I'm not going to say educational, academic papers on these subjects, and they become radicalized by it, and they put a mask on, go black bloc, terrorize anybody who's around the area until they get their way. And then they try to disappear as if nothing happened because they know their lives would be ruined.
Where we get into the bashing men part of it is yes, feminizing the education system, that is the in large part the fault of toxic femininity. But on the other hand, where were the men who let this happen? And where are the men who are complaining about the situation, but what are you doing to stop it? And I think a great example of this was back when the stuff in Virginia was blowing up, and I'm pretty sure this was in the first Trump administration. Or was the no? This was Biden because remember we brought up the articles that showed there was a link between Biden's Attorney General Merrick Garland and one of these organizations that makes money by putting CRT into classrooms. Oh, and so that's just a coincidence that Garland's son-in-law makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year off of this. And he sent out a memo saying that the people showing up and protesting in school boards are white domestic terrorists. That's just a coincidence. Well, in one of these instances,
Well,
a father,
especially since the people showing up and protesting in school boards is a great example of positive femininity. Mama Bear, Mama Bear, you're doing this to my child.
yeah,
Yeah.
or in this case, positive masculinity of, hey, this happened to my daughter. She was raped in a bathroom by a boy who felt pretty, and you let him use the girl's bathroom.
Hmm.
And then you covered it up, and he went to another school and did the same thing. You need to be held to account. Good for him. Here's the problem. Why was he alone? One. Two, the school board shut him down, cut off his mic, and said, if you don't leave, we're going to arrest you. And he said, no, this is a public space. I have a right to be here. He was tackled to the ground by police officers and hauled off in handcuffs. Where were the men?
Well, that's
Okay.
I just wrote this down, and it might be the perfect place to put it in there because of the cops that tackled him to the ground. We've talked about sneaky fuckers before. Sneaky fuckers are the cuttlefish that pretend to be women to get past the alpha male, to get to the females and basically rape the females when they get there.
Hmm.
They pretend to be the other thing. Those cops were sneaky fuckers. Sneaky fuckers are the true toxic masculinity.
Hmm. And that's a great point because that doesn't just come into effect in in the player, in the in the hookup, in the love them and leave them. No, that's probably the most blatant expression of it because caveman brain you know want make babies, right? But you
But
can
they're not
have
sneaking. They're not
right,
yeah.
but you can have the same thing if you have that person in a position of power, authority, where they could do something, but yeah, I don't want to rock the boat because I got a good gig here.
Hmm.
I don't want to rock the boat because I got a badge and a gun. I don't want to rock the boat because uh I'm a you know I'm close to retirement as a teacher and I've got a good pension and I've got good benefits and I don't want to get in trouble, so I'm not going to blow the whistle on or I'm not going to stand up with these parents or students with what's going on in these classrooms and in these schools. Where were the men? Why was that father all alone with what happened to his daughter? Even if it that horrific thing hadn't happened to his daughter, he's still standing up speaking truth. Like real truth, not my truth, but the
Hmm.
truth.
Yeah,
And
there's
he was
two
tackled
part.
to the ground and hauled off in
Yeah,
handcuffs.
there's two parts to that. Is one is so many people do something with the mindset of it. Oh, that happens, but it won't happen to me.
Yeah.
And so there's that part of it, which makes it easier for the second part, which is if you were in the Nuremberg trials, everybody thinks they would have been the one that didn't put Jews in the oven, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what was the standard? I was just following orders.
Yeah.
I was just following orders. Those guys were just following orders.
We might have to have a Sunday school on that because I got a thing, but I don't want to
Well,
get
no,
sidetracked,
but
so I might
let's
bring it up
keep
here in a
let's
minute.
keep us on the subject. That's how our school system trains us.
Exactly.
Just follow orders. Sit down, shut up, do these problems, write this word 10 times with the definition, blah, 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 blah. Now, are there merits to some of those techniques for learning? Yes, there are. But
That's a good point because that's how that gets into the system in the first place is in much the same way when we were reading from Andrews's articles on the feminization and on HR. HR didn't come out of nowhere. That there were, you know, hypotheses and even theory that said this should work. It's just there were all these other problems with it, and no one looked at the problems. No one looked at the counter examples. No one went back and checked the data after the fact and said, is this thing actually working the way we think it's supposed to work? Oh, no. Maybe we should do something else. It's like John Hopkins stopped changing manual transmissions to automatic transmissions, even though they started the procedure because someone actually went and looked at the data and said, "Hey, what happens post-op to these people? Are we having positive outcomes? Oh crap, no. Then we should probably stop doing this." So, I've got a great post here from Clifton Duncan.
did I make it to where you could share?
Yeah.
Okay.
He shared this a little while ago. I was like, I got to repost this so I can save it and have it handy. Um, because this is a great excoriation of both men who aren't being properly masculine and the misandrists who are all masculinity is toxic in a similar to way to how we brought up Douglas Murray on Rogan. And
Mhm.
here you have a soft-spoken, very well-educated, homosexual British man, and yet he was peak masculinity in that moment. Why? Because he stood up and said no. He said he's sitting with the biggest, most famous podcaster in the world and some comedian dude who's got a bigger following than Douglas Murray's does, and he was not in the least intimidated.
Well, you could probably he is a comedian by his original trade, but you could
Yeah.
probably label Dave Smith as one of the leaders of the Libertarian Party.
And he's kind
He is probably the most influential person in the Libertarian Party.
and he has now kind of shifted away from pure comedy to more of what we would call edutainment, where he is still entertaining and he is still comical, but
Mm.
he
But
is
he's also very
talking
much an
about real
advocate
stuff.
for certain things. Like he's, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm very anti-war, obviously. We've talked about this, as we all should be. But he's anti-war to a fault, where he
Hmm.
doesn't look at the nuance of the argument sometimes. So it's it is. I need to watch the debate between him and Konstantin Kisin because I heard it was very good. But
Yeah.
uh, where was I going with this? No, but he's a sharp guy. He's a very
Hmm.
sharp guy. And the sad thing is, realistically, had he not dropped out of the libertarian race for their candidate, we'd have Kamala Harris as our president right now. Because no, there was a lot of shenanigans to get the person nominated as the candidate in the Libertarian Party this year, but they wouldn't have happened because he was the most popular candidate up until he dropped out. I think it was because he had kids or something like
Yeah.
that. But
All right. So Clifton Duncan, for any who doesn't know, his bio on X is America's favorite theater kid, 20 plus years on stage and screen, currently creating a play about Thomas Sowell. And oh yeah, he's black. So he has been canceled for a long time because he says things you're not supposed to say when you are a black man in the entertainment industry.
yeah.
Um,
And for those that don't know his name, it's because he was mostly Broadway.
yeah, yeah. So he posted this back on the 18th, and I thought this was pretty profound. He says a lot of things that I think are quite profound. You are a man. You've been sold a lie, told you're either society's oppressor or its plow horse, or what makes a man are money, muscles, and pussy. You've been made to feel ashamed of your genius or told to dismiss it. Yet you are Steinbeck, Hemingway, Stevie Wonder, Prince, Johnny Cash, James Brown, Bob Dylan, Ibsen, Picasso. You are Monet, Michelangelo, Mozart, Shakespeare, Chekhov, Denzel, Sondheim, Sophocles, Sinatra, and Sammy Davis Jr. What a broad spectrum of masculinity there. You know,
Mhm.
stop there halfway through to the point. He's already made his point, but he's going to go on and put a period at the end of it or an exclamation point at the end of it, which is look at the wide array of men and the incredible things they have done. You know,
Well,
great men of literature like Steinbeck and Hemingway, classic artists like Mozart, but also modern ones like Prince and Johnny Cash. You know, great actors like Denzel Washington. You know, this great wide spectrum, and they all did it by being men.
which is funny because Sinatra's in there. And did you know the fun fact? He actually went to jail for the grand crime of seduction
No,
in his younger years, before he was even famous.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
All right, back to Clifton Duncan's post here. Your work has transcended time. You've created beauty beyond measure, pathos beyond compare. You've engaged life's big questions with bottomless courage and creativity. To claim that the sex which produced most of humanity's greatest artistic achievements is emotionally stunted or brutish or disposable is one of the great psyops of all time. You are told left and right what a quote real man in quote is and what a real man does. For the sake of cultural renewal, it's crucial for you to reclaim this idea. Real men make art.
You know, it's a trope, but I'll give you a great example in real life. Uh, there's the meme, which is a meme based on truth, of the guy looking over his lawn after he's done. And he's very proud of himself because it's perfect. Everybody says, "Oh, lawn work, that's manual labor, that's men." No, he's proud of the art he made, which was taking something that was wild and overgrown
It's a good point. Yeah.
and going in a direction that just is going to destroy everything and then making it into something that's beautiful. Yeah, people don't think of it like that because we're told not to, but realistically, that is what's happening
Yeah.
in the person's mind. And we make a trope out of it and say, "Oh, well, you got your white Balance shoes on with grass stains." Yeah, but that's what they're doing. They're proud of the thing they did, the art they made with what they were given.
Hmm.
Just as Michelangelo made a freaking mural out of a ceiling, right?
And you're never going to achieve that because you're not Michelangelo, and I know that because there's only one Michelangelo.
Hmm.
Um, but
I
you
happen to be
can,
a decent artist, though.
but you can do what you can do with what you have.
Hmm. Yeah. I
And
mean, I take that when I have results with a client. When I have results with the client, I mean, Arnold used to talk about this. It's sculpting a body. And not
yeah,
only, and for him, it was sculpting his own body. But for me, it's actually harder because you're sculpting somebody else's body where you only have a little bit of input. The words you say in 1 hour, 3 days a week, maybe.
yeah. You can't actually feel what that person feels. You can only intuit based off of your learning and experience and asking the right questions, getting feedback, seeing how they move. So you've got to intuit all this
And it's not
and
just
then be able to
looks.
sculpt that.
And it's not just looks. When someone comes back to me and they're like, I had an 11%, which is true. This is a true story. I had an 11% increase in bone mass. Holy shit, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
That's beautiful because you are going to live so much better now.
exactly. And that is a great point to Clifton Duncan's point. There is what he is saying is you are going to live better if you embrace this idea, and society is going to live better if it re-embraces this idea that
Not only that, the inverse is where we get down that authoritarian road you're talking about with the education system,
yes,
because this is right up. I don't know if Beck talks about it in her book that you keep bringing up, but the root of her work is based on McGilchrist, and McGilchrist talks about this. We can't have all the nice things without the ability to appreciate nice things.
it's a good point.
And so the sterilization of everything, going back to the house example, treating a human being is an art. Prescribing the standard of care is education.
That's why we used to call it practicing medicine
Hmm.
because
Well,
every
that's why the
individual
doctor
is
used to
different.
go to your house.
That too.
We talk about, okay, here's a great example. London cholera. Everybody was getting cholera in these poor areas, and the doctor was going to the houses, and instead of just treating the disease, he was looking at the environment
Mm-hmm.
and he was saying what could be going on here. Now, this practice maybe not have passed an IRB these times because he gave his assistant a pill full of poop, but but
That's true.
he
Yeah.
figured out it wasn't about treating the symptoms of the cholera. It was about, oh my gosh, the sewer system is connected to their water supply. That's why everybody's getting this, and they made the changes that needed to be made. And his assistant, I think, survived, but was not feeling good for a long time because he ate the poop from the water supply. But that's an art, though. That is going in there and saying not just, oh, they have cholera, here's your medicine. It's they have cholera, and oh my gosh, it smells like shit in here.
And for
Is
for
this the
anyone who
water
doesn't,
you're drinking?
cholera and dysentery were and still are in places where you don't have modern sanitary plumbing, some of the biggest killers of human beings throughout history.
Hmm. Well, everybody talks about modern medicine and how the pills are saving us and the surgeries are saving us and everything. The biggest impact to our health has been hygiene.
Yes.
It has
Yes.
been hygiene. So that's one example right there. And I know his name is not pronounceable by me, so I'll Google search it. But let's see. There was a guy who figured out that all these mothers were dying giving birth because the doctors were going back and forth from the morgue to the PD center where they were helping people give birth without washing their hands.
I believe he was thrown in an insane asylum
He
because they
was.
thought he was nuts for
Hmm.
suggesting that washing your hands would protect against disease and death. And turns out he was super right.
Hmm.
And
Yep. Yep. Ignace Semmelweis. He was Hungarian
Semmelweis, yep.
physician. Yep.
So, yep, he came up with the idea of hand washing and just that and modern sewer and plumbing so that we take the bad and get it away from us and make sure the water that comes in is clean. And oh my gosh, life expectancy skyrocketed
Hmm.
after that. Um, I had a thought and I've lost it. Uh, ugh, brain.
Sorry.
um,
Do we want to segue? You kind of brought up rigid thinking. What did we want to go into anything there?
um,
We've been really good at keeping these at around an hour. So let's.
yeah.
Uh,
So I teased something that I think I want to go into more depth next time because we haven't argued in a while and we may argue after this, but um one of one of the things that corrupted our American institutions was that for about the first 100 years of our history, the Declaration of Independence was considered a founding document on par with the Constitution. So if the preamble to the Constitution is the preamble to the Constitution, then the Declaration is the preamble to the preamble, essentially, is how it was looked at. Well, in the late 1800s, that became a problem because of the appeal to authority that the Declaration of Independence makes. And there were a lot of people who didn't like that. And I contend that you can be the high priest of the flying spaghetti monster, and you should want the Ten Commandments in the courthouse. And that is a big bone of contention I have. And one of the things, one of the root causes of why I get so annoyed when I'm studying for my stupid classes and I'm reading these textbooks going, you people are awful. And it makes it hard to concentrate. But the the idea that there is a higher power, whatever you want to say that is or even isn't, if you are a Patrick Henry hardcore atheist, but the idea that even we humans, we may be the apex of the animal world on this world, but we are not the apex of the universe. And so just because you say something doesn't make it true. Just because you can do something doesn't make it right. And that is another part of this corruption of education as an institution that allowed it to become more rigid, to allow it to indoctrinate in rigid mental thinking. And so I may want to dive more into that and this idea that the there is possibly a third great awakening happening. And for anyone who doesn't know, you should have learned in your US history courses in school about the great awakenings. And there were two of them that were essentially uh big nationwide Christian revivals where there was this movement to get back to church. There was a movement culturally to make sure that we were a Christian nation, not just in name only. And after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, there's some data to indicate that that might be happening again. That could be a very good thing or a very terrible thing.
well, I'll bring up an example of how it's scary. Is We have another example of a great awakening, the guy who wrote the book A Great Awakening, which is Putin's Rasputin, Dugin.
Yeah.
He is supporting a lot of the what Lindsay would call the woke right movements that are coming out of this. And there's a reason for that because it fits right in with that ideological system,
Hmm.
which it is. The argument is there's a woke and there's a great awakening, and they're opposing forces. The problem is by the horseshoe model, they're opposing forces just like the Nazi Party was opposing communism. Neither of them were good.
Hmm.
So that's again right back to our pendulum swing. We need that to kind of settle down a little bit, not just keep swinging more and more and more and more. I wrote this down at the beginning of the conversation just because it popped in my head by what we were saying. Here's the thing, this is to kind of wrap all of the toxic femininity and masculinity stuff together. And we can go back to the French Revolution and the subsequent history behind what happened after. Toxic femininity empowers toxic masculinity.
Hmm.
We had the French Revolution. The left basically lopped off the head of every what we would call conservative person in the country, in the leadership of the country, anyways. And you ended up with Napoleon because people needed that.
Yeah.
In Maoist China, they did what was it, the
Cultural Revolution.
Cultural Revolution, which was a very feminine movement. And at the end of it, a strong male leader came in, lopped off the heads and put dunce hats on everybody, and killed 100, estimated about 50 to 100 million people, right? Uh, Lenin was a little bit different. He was pretty transparent in his thinking because he would say, "We don't have the guns, so we'll use politics, and then when we get the guns, we'll use the guns." So he was a little bit more transparent. But yeah, the toxic femininity. So when things get good and we say, "Oh, if things were just more feminine, things would be even better," ultimately creates bad times, which the strong male leader, which everybody wants, which everybody thinks is Trump. Now we're not there yet.
Hmm.
I'm afraid of what's coming.
Hmm.
I am afraid of what's coming because I listen to people like Fuentes, and I hear with the words he's saying, and I'm like, gosh, the things this guy wants. Oh gosh, you're literally Hitler is not even close to what this guy wants.
That is one of the things I was thinking of when I said this. If this is a third great awakening, it could be very good or it could be very bad. And he was one of the people I was thinking of the very bad is if the grifters get a hold of it and
What do
yank
they call
that
his
pendulum
group?
over
The
where they want it.
Groypers? They're the
I think
Groypers?
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember why, but yeah, that's what they call themselves.
Or to get us kicked off YouTube here, this is how Sharia law comes in. Sharia law is the definition of patriarchy, my friends. And you get all of this, plus you're enabling a certain demographic that happens to practice Sharia law. So they're taking no damage from this at all. They're taking no damage and they're encouraging because, well, why wouldn't we help the enemy of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?
Mhm.
So they're sitting there going, "Hey, wokies, go. Keep
Yeah.
doing what you're doing because you're letting us do whatever we want."
I don't remember who I heard say this, but they called Zohran Mamdani a Islamunist.
Yeah,
I was like that
we
fit
see it
that
happening in New
fits.
York. This is our
Yeah.
canary in the coal mine moment.
Hmm.
And everybody's, there's either the groypers or the people that are backing it, and everybody else is uneducated. And it's like, what the hell?
Yeah. I don't remember who I heard say this, but being a man is not a leisure pursuit. And so we do leisure to reset our minds and bodies for the things that have to be done.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's look at lions, right? Those male lions lay around 90% of the day, but that 10%, they're doing work
mhm,
because hyenas are vicious.
mhm. Other lions, other male lions that are going to
Other
come
male
in
lions, yeah, yeah.
and yep, kill any cub that is not of breeding age, that is not theirs, and kill all the males. Yep.
Yeah,
It's
look at Usain Bolt. The guy's fastest man in the world can do what he does for 10 seconds and then he's got to rest the rest of the day. It's that's how men are built. We you know, we're better than other animals about it because we used to kind of jog down our prey at a point, but at the same time, then we would take like 2 weeks off between those activities. So yeah, we are made to explode when it's necessary and rest when it's necessary, but you have to know when the necessary is. And modern society has made that very, very, very confusing for men. And that's why we become toxic because you either exploding all the time or you're lazy all the time. Oh, shit. Sorry. Drop something. Hand movements on my desk. Nothing important, I think. But we explode all the modern man explodes all the time, which is actually part of the education system too. Social, we haven't even gone into social emotional learning right now. Teach a guy to be in touch with his emotions. What is the Dax line in Real Man? You want him to wear his heart on his sleeve, but you get mad when he tears it sometimes. You know, that kind of thing. And or you get the opposite, which is the sedation hypothesis that we're just sitting there playing video games, smoking pot the whole time. Neither of those are good.
yeah,
Neither of those are good. We're not exploding when we need to, or we're exploding all the time. And it's just created a very, very, very bad environment because more people need to be speaking out. And actually, we need an environment where you're not just dismissed or you're not ostracized for speaking out. Come back at me with a point. It's in the
yeah,
comments right below. Come back at me with a point. Say something that contradicts what we just said in a very academic or at least coherent manner, and we'll talk about it. I'll comment on it, or we'll bring it up in the next episode. I'll probably comment on it just so you know it's there. And yeah, that's how discourse is done. Manliness can be through words.
yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. And who knows what we'll talk about next Wheel of Time episode, but I'm sure we'll find some way to connect it to all this. And then we may get a little theological next Wednesday. So
Well,
I'm
you know,
sure.
here's a thought. Let's think on this before Saturday. Toxic masculinity, but from the dark friend perspective. So why did Demandred do what he did? Why did Asmodean do what he did? Why did
So those
uh,
are two great examples because they're very
Bethamel,
different yet
yeah,
very similar.
or even one of my favorite minor characters, Carradine. Why did he do what he did? You know, that kind of stuff. And just say, okay, this is how it goes wrong. This is where masculinity does go wrong and it can lead to evil.
Yeah. I think Asmodean and Demandred are great contrast there, or great similarities to the point you made about, sedation versus explosion,
Which is
right?
funny
And how,
because Demandred would be my stepdad and Asmodean would be my real dad. You know enough of the story to know that
yep,
that's true.
that's very true. All right, well, we will see y'all then.
All right, later.